Sonder recently made an incredible raised bed and trellis system with our leftover wood for the Meadow House, so it was time to fill it up and plant it. We had a lot of stone shards from the stone pathway that was recently put in, so I took the initiative to utilize those and fill the bottom of the bed to provide for extra drainage. I really only needed about 6 to 10 inches of soil for planting, since I'll be using herbaceous perennials, so filling up that extra space was a good solution so I wouldn't need as much soil or potting medium. After Sonder was finished, I collected a number of trimmed branches and dead limbs to fill up more of the garden bed in more of a hugelkultur fashion. After that, I brought in 9 cubic feet of raised bed mix, 4 cubic feet of garden soil, 6 cubic feet of compost, and topped it off with a 1-inch layer of hardwood mulch so that I would protect the lower layers from harsh sun or rain. After that, it was pretty much ready to plant.
Well, we're going to be planting up the Meadow House bed with the trellis system that Sonder so expertly made. And I think I underestimated how large this bed actually is because it is a formidable bed. But I think I have enough plants to put into the bed and make it look at least a little full. And I don't have all of the plants. I actually have a climbing rose that will be coming in, and I will need to plant it probably on this trellis. And then I have a clematis that I could plant up on the other side. And I don't know, we'll see how they do. This is eastern facing light, and you could see that we get some southern exposure as well, so it's really actually quite bright today. But I want to take you through some of the plants that I'll be planting in here. And really what I was aiming for was primarily these like soft lavenders and purples interspersed with some yellows and whites. So that's kind of what we're going here for. All perennial. I have nothing that is actually going to be annual in this bed, or at least not at the onset. And some of the plants that I am still in process of receiving because I've placed an order for them and that you plant them in the fall are some spring bulbs. So I'll be planting those in here as well. You'll know that we did an 80,000 bulb lawn up towards the common house on the land, and that just looks exquisite. So I thought, you know, why not actually put some in the planters as well? I think that'll look really nice for some really early blooms. But I'll take you through the plant palette that we have here. And again, not everything is in bloom, so it may not look like much, but hopefully by next year or the following year, we'll actually have a much fuller bed. So the first one that I'll show you, and I have this in the pollinator garden and in the memorial garden, is this Scabiosa. So this is Scabiosa columbaria, blue butterfly. And the reason why I got this plant is because it pretty much is in bloom. I mean, it's not in bloom right now, but in the garden, it's actually in bloom for quite a while. So generally from April all the way through October, sometimes even into November. And so it really provides a pollen source all year round. So that's one of the ones that I'm looking to have. And then this one is a new catmint. This is a cultivar named Purrfect, so Purrfect. And it has a very tiny leaf, and the reason why I went with this one is that it's actually a lower growing species, 10 to 12 inches high, which is like nothing. I think I have one that's called Walker's Low, which is more about 18 inches to 24 inches high. But I wanted something that would not basically, like I wanted the rose and the clematis to really stand out in this bed. And I didn't want to go higher than maybe 2 feet in this bed itself. So some plants that would kind of cascade over or waterfall over the edge of the bed, and ones that would kind of stay upright but would be a little bit more of a low growing plant. So that's what I was looking for. Here's another one. This is Helianthus, and Helianthus usually is pretty tall too, but this is a 12-inch sunflower, and this is called Table Mountain. So I got 4 of these, and I figured this would be a nice sunflower that we could throw in there. And there's always sunflowers here in the landscape, both native and non-native sunflowers. I mean, even the black oil sunflower seeds that I put into the bird feeders behind me my chipmunk is always planting those. So this one called Table Mountain, I figured would provide a little bit more of that continuity from the Meadow House planter into the landscape. This one actually has a little flower bud starting. And this is one of our rudbeckias, and this is called Speedy Smiles. I actually got this on sale. And it is a black-eyed Susan, but it only grows 12 to 15 inches high. So I figured black-eyed Susans, they're also in the landscape. This one is just a little bit more of a lower stature, so I figured let's actually try this in the meadow home planter. And these tend to spread too, so that's always good. You know, if it ever gets too much for the planter, you could always divide and remove some. Next one on the list is something that I've planted heavily in the landscape now, and this is Ceanothus. This is Ceanothus americanus, which is the New Jersey tea. It's also called red root, and this is one of our native flowering perennials. It's kind of like a small shrub, so it grows, I would say, 2 to 3 feet high and 2 to 3 feet wide. And it typically is in bloom from July to August. This is a bit too small of a plant in order to get a bloom on it, but it has a nice white bloom, and a lot of the butterflies and moths are attracted to it. So I figured this will be a shrubbier version that I could plant maybe, you know, towards perhaps like the ends, so it kind of feels like it has some robustness to it, even though these plants are quite small. Okay, well, I couldn't do a summer or fall without asters, and this is called Aster Woods Blue. And this is kind of a more mounding or clumping aster. So this grows to about 12 inches high. And like I said, it's a bit more of a mound, and you can see it's actually blooming now. And it is September right now, and all the goldenrods and the asters are in bloom. So I did not want to leave out asters. They're such a really a foundation to our plantings here, our native plantings. Now, this one says it's called Woods Blue, but I think this is more of like a purple lavender shade. So I think this one will actually go very well in the meadow home planter. Okay, so I have 2 different kinds of bellflowers here, and these are campanulas, and this was on sale for like $6 at Home Depot, so I had to get it. It only grows about 8 inches high, 6 to 8 inches high, so it's a pretty low grower. And then this is a different cultivar. This is Campanula Blue Waterfall, and it has a tendency to get, again, to kind of cascade over, hence the cultivar name. And I thought like planting that around the edges of the bed so it could cascade over would be a really nice feature in this bed. Okay, this one doesn't look like much. It's a bit crispy, but I'm still gonna plant it because the roots are most likely just fine. This is Callilophus Prairie Lode. So it gets these really bright, cheery, yellow, kind of primrosy blooms. And it, like the campanula, it kind of cascades over. And I have this actually planted in the orchard, and it's always blooming and off blooming. So it has a pretty wide season of blooms. So I'm going to plant this. I'm hoping that the roots are going to be good. I think once I water this in, everything will kind of be locked and loaded. And because it's a perennial and a very hardy perennial, I'm sure it's actually going to come back, even though it doesn't look like much right now. Okay, these are 2 plants. They are not native, but I really love them in the garden. This is called Veronica Snow Candles, and they get only about 8 inches high. And like the name would imply, they actually are white flowering and they are erect. So I thought they would be a nice feature within this planter box because I have a number of ones that are prostrate or cascading, and this one will kind of stick right up. And they have a pretty good bloom time, so June through August. So again, kind of too small to be blooming right now. That you might sometimes see, you know, one in bloom, you know, because it's in September and it could kind of push it in. I know a lot of my plants are actually still blooming now, and I'm surprised by that, but the weather's just been so good. But these should bloom once I plant them June through August. And like I said, really beautiful white erect inflorescences. And I have some pink versions actually planted in our pollinator garden as well. So this is one of our native perennials in the spring, kind of a spring bloomer. So April, May, and early June. And this is Anemone canadensis, our meadow anemone. And it gets a nice little white flower. And I have some of this actually planted in our big front garden, which I call the hydrangea garden. And I think I might actually have some in the shade garden as well. And this doesn't grow too high, 12 inches or so. And I figured a really nice early spring ephemeral, this would be really nice to see and also have one of our natives in a planter box. And related to our native anemone is Anemone sylvestris, and this is more of a native to Europe. And this one has a different bloom time. So this one is May, June, and to July. And this one is called Snowdrop, or it's called windflower, that type of plant. And it actually prefers partial shade. So I'm hoping it's actually gonna do really well here because it seems so sunny right now. But once the second half of the day and the sun goes overhead, this is in pure shade. So I think this will be enough sun for the day. Essentially, when you hit like 12 noon, you start to get a waning of the sun, and this gets nice eastern light. So I'm hoping this will be actually pretty good, and we'll give it a shot in the bed. Okay, and this next one is called the pasque flower, and I've introduced the pasque flower on multiple occasions, and I've planted it in the memorial garden, I've planted it in the pollinator garden, and this is actually one that's native to the United States. We don't have any native pasque flowers, at least to my knowledge, in the Northeast, but this is more out west, but it's hardy to our zone. And this is Pulsatilla patens variation Wolfgangii, and it grows a little white flower on it. And I really love the seed heads of pasque flowers as well. They're related to Clematis, so they have a very similar seed head. So I thought this would be a nice addition to this bed. Okay, this is looking a little crispy, but this is Clematis Miss Bateman. And this gets a very nice, vibrant white flower. And it blooms twice throughout the year. So I'm going to water this in pretty well because it looks like it's got singed in the sun a little bit. And this will be one of the plants that I'll be growing up on the back. I might actually try to attempt to grow another plant on the back as well. Maybe I'll do 2 clematises, maybe I'll do something else, but I definitely want a rose on this one. So I've never grown the specific rose or the variety before. It's like a really beautiful lavender color, which is really unusual for roses. So I'm gonna try it and see how it does on this, and if I have to change it out down the line, then I will change it out if it doesn't seem to be thriving there. All right, so I loaded up this bed with a bunch of raised bed mix, some garden soil, and also some compost and mulch, just a little layer of mulch on top, because you could see we get a tremendous amount of sun here during parts of the day, when it's a sunny day at least, and I don't want the soil to dry out completely or get that kind of crusty layer on top, so I think the mulch actually really helps that. I have to fix the hose because the hose busted a little bit, so I'm going to have to change out the hose in order to be able to water this in. But in the meantime, I'm going to start planting this up. Well, I think I got everything laid out in the back of the bed. I think it looks really good. And actually I had some plants left over, which is always a good problem because I could plant those in some of the garden beds up on top of the land, which is really great. But I think this is already looking really full. And some of these plants are going to spread. Some of these plants actually spread rhizomatically as well, which are these like little stems that just trail on top of the ground and will just kind of spread and spread like crazy. So I'm eager to see what this is going to look like next season, because even though we'll have some blooms this season, it's not going to be like that impressive because all of these plants are kind of young. I got 4-inch plants, so nothing that's too big. With the exception of the campanulas, those are in a bit more of like a gallon pot, and some of the, of course, the clematis. And I'm waiting for the rose, so I have a little section cut out for the rose so I could plant that once I receive it, and then the garden bed will be essentially complete.
If you find our videos enlightening, do give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to know when the next new videos launch, hit the notifications button while you're at it. Your viewership and support of the channel goes a long way. We commit 10% of our Google AdSense revenues back to great community projects in the Finger Lakes community, which is matched by our partners over at Espoma Organic. So it's just another way to help build strength and support within the community by the community. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.